Hello and welcome to Rethinking How People Use Digital Health, an event that we at Matter are hosting with Accenture. I'm Stephen Collins, the CEO of Matter. Our mission is to accelerate the pace of change of healthcare, and we do several things to advance that goal. One is we run an incubator for healthcare startups. Since we launched in 2015, we've worked with 1,000 companies from around the world, range from very early to growth stage startups, and our member companies have raised more than $5 billion to fuel their growth. We also run accelerators, 6 to 8 per year, all in partnership with large health systems, life sciences companies, payers, and associations. And next week, we're going to kick one off focused on maternal health in partnership with HCSC, Organon, Stryker, U Chicago Medicine, Baycare, Parkview Health, and the Laerdal Million Lives Fund. We also work with large enterprises to help them build their innovation capabilities. We have a suite of education, training, and insight services that help them make sense of emerging technologies and figure out how to harness them. And we're a nexus for people who are passionate about healthcare innovation. We bring people together to be inspired and learn and connect with each other. And we work with organizations such as Accenture to put together events such as this one today. The healthcare industry has more data than any other industry, and the volume of healthcare data is growing faster than other industries. Given the myriad sources and forms of the data, the ability to organize it and share it and harness it to improve health and healthcare is an ongoing challenge that entrepreneurs and large enterprises alike are investing billions of dollars to figure out. Today, we are joined by leaders from Accenture and Bristol Myers Squibb, Alexion, Optum, Philips, for a deep dive into barriers to sharing and harnessing data, how patients feel about sharing data, and areas for innovation. First, we're going to hear from Accenture on key findings from research they did on connecting patients to better health. In the research, which they'll publish in the near future, Accenture surveyed more than 800 people to understand their relationship with digital health devices and how they share or don't share the data from these devices. And to kick us off, I'm going to hand it over to your MC for the day, Ben Ferrara, who focuses at Accenture on advanced therapies and shaping ecosystems to support new healthcare models and who's been involved with this research. So Ben, thanks for the relationship, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining, and appreciate you all for making the time today on this exciting topic. I'm excited to be the moderator for today's panel, and will introduce the kind of run of show. As mentioned by Stephen, I focus on advanced therapies, cell and gene, rare disease, et cetera, and how ecosystem plays like digital health are supporting new healthcare delivery models. I was at Vive last week in Los Angeles, focused on digital health. And there is an active debate in healthcare about the age-old service model and how to address growing challenges, such as managing adverse events in new medicine, gaps in preventative care, et cetera. And therefore, a lot of excitement around new concepts in digital health that can support healthcare anywhere, and how technology is being used today to help support patients, providers, and payers to deliver better outcomes. We at Accenture are excited to partner with Matter to bring some of the most relevant topics of our largest clients to forums like this, and today's discussion on how digital health can play a greater role in healthcare and what is the role of patient data to support that goal. So we have an esteemed group of panelists. I'm excited at the panel discussion to give their introduction. They cover a number of different ecosystem stakeholders, so we should have a very fruitful discussion. What we wanted to start with is some patient health data research. So we will have Paulina and Paula jump on the line, give a brief introduction, and talk about the fact base that they've uncovered, doing some quant and qual research into this area, which should serve as good substrate for our panel discussion. And then we will have roughly 20 to 30 minutes to go over a panel discussion. And in the end, we will save 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A for those of you on the line. So please enter questions as you think of them. and we will save some time at the end for those questions. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Paula and Paulina to make their introductions.
Thank you, Ben. It's great to join you all here today. So my name is Paula. I am part of our Accenture Strategy Life Sciences practice, and I mostly work within the commercial space for life sciences clients. And recently, the thing that I spend most of my time thinking about is how we can leverage customer data to then cater to the best customer engagements possible. Paulina?
Awesome. Thanks, Paula. I'm Paulina, and I'm part of Accenture's Life Sciences Strategy and Consulting practice. And my work focuses on, in the commercial space, the patient and healthcare provider experience with applications in rare disease and other therapeutic areas. If we're able to move on to the next slide, we'll get started sharing some of this research with you. We're really excited to share it. Like Ben mentioned, it's going to be published in the coming future, so you're getting a little bit of a preview of some of our thinking. So advances in technology have drastically changed how health is tracked and managed. From smartwatches to CGMs, we know that digital health adoption has increased substantially in the last few years. There's been a lot of movement in the market, with digital health startups grabbing $30 billion in funding in 2021. But now we see biopharma and medtech reevaluating their digital health strategy to really focus in on solutions that provide real and unique value. In order to understand what people value when it comes to digital health, we decided to do this research. We started by surveying about 800 digital natives that reflect the proportional demographics across the US, and spoke one-on-one with 10 individuals who use digital health tools to manage their general health, chronic conditions, and rare conditions in order to understand folks' relationship with digital health and health data. Finally, we researched industry trends to contextualize our key findings. Our research shows that increasingly digital health is becoming health. Digital is core to our lives as consumers, and it's also core to our lives as patients. If we move on to the next slide, you'll see the three key themes on digital health and data sharing that we identified throughout our research. First, you'll see that we confirmed that most patients, 91% of our respondents, are already using digital health tools, and most of those patients are actively reviewing the data from their digital health tools at least once a week. For this study, we defined digital health tools as health tracking apps, consumer wearables, wearable medical devices, and prescription and consumer home medical devices. In terms of digital health device use, despite most patients using digital health devices, we found that people whose household income is below the US median are about 2 to 3 times less likely to use digital health devices than folks at the US median income level. The second theme we identified was a significant gap in patients who share their health data today and patients who are willing to share their health data. Just taking a step back on this one, we believe that this gap is in part due to a lack of clear patient understanding of who they're actually sharing their data with. A recent Q-centric survey illuminated this lack of transparency, with over 61% of their survey respondents indicating they have never discussed how their healthcare data is used. But back to our findings, the biggest gaps we saw in who patients share their data with today and who they're willing to share their data with were for research institutions, biopharma, and medtech. We found that about 71% of patients are willing to share their health data, and that a majority of patients who do not believe they share their health data today say it is because no one has ever asked them to share it. Finally, our final theme that we found is that personal health benefit is the strongest motivator for patients to share their health data. Interestingly, we also found that most people who share their health data today have had a really positive experience sharing it. Only about 2% of respondents reported having a negative experience sharing their data at all. Next, I'll pass it over to Paula, who's going to talk us through some of the key actions and implications of these findings for our biopharma clients.
Thanks, Paulina. So on the next slide, we basically have identified 5 key actions that are based on the findings that Paulina just walked us through that are to consider for stakeholders across the healthcare ecosystem to really get the most out of their digital health investments. So starting from the left-hand side, the first one is really around setting the strategy. This means being intentional and thoughtful about the data that you will capture and also how you plan to use it. Generating the right insights then allows patients, biopharma, and medtech companies to inform and better inform decision-making, accelerate innovation, and ultimately improve patient outcomes. The second action is around making the ask. So this is really about how we establish and maintain transparency and trust with patients. Based on the data that Paulina just shared, we know that patients are willing to share their health data, but they really need to know what data they're sharing, why they are sharing, who is then collecting it, and how they're going to use it. The third action is around seeing the person and not the patient. This means understanding the consumer's lives outside of their individual diagnosis to understand the additional conditions and treatments that they are managing, the existing digital tools that they're using as part of their lives, social determinants of health, and then mental and emotional well-being. Lifestyle choices are also important in order to understand how digital health will then fit into their lives. Consumers are increasingly drawn to digital solutions that engage them in a more holistic level. The fourth action is around making data meaningful. This means helping patients identify actionable personal health insights based on the data that they capture. People want to be healthy, and we heard this loud and clear from the survey. And they're motivated to use their digital health tool when they share data, but then being able to get recommendations that help them live more healthily. And then the last action is really around accelerating the data impact. This is all about leveraging new technologies like generative AI to unlock the insights across the patient population. It is critical to note here that the data that is used to train Gen AI models must be complete and representative of the patient population that it is intended to serve to avoid creating a skewed model. And here's where digital health really could play an important role from a reach perspective, once again, supported by the findings of our research. Now I'll hand things over back to Ben to get us rolling with the panel conversation.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So again, honored to moderate this diverse panel of folks we have covering biopharma, medtech, healthcare services. It's really exciting. We're going to cover 3 big areas that are kind of supported through the research that Paulina and Paula just walked through. First, which is kind of a state of the union today, what is really the role of digital health, both in discovery of new medicines and healthcare delivery? From there, we'll look at how ecosystems are shaping around patient data, what's working, what's not. And finally, we'll look at a future outlook in terms of how we can think about value with digital health and using patient data potentially, and what are some discussions around new tools like generative AI as kind of a conduit for success. We'll have 30 minutes and again, 10 minutes at the end for questions from the audience. One disclaimer before I do introductions. All of the panelists we have here come from large companies, some with startup experience, but want to remind everyone that their perspectives shared today reflect their own thoughts and not those of the representative companies. I just want to put that out there. Okay, so I'll start with Alex. So Alex is a patient-focused leader with experiences in both large biopharma and startups, fueling innovation and tackling big ideas, and most recently focused in drug development within R&D. So Alex, thanks for joining us. I think you can jump on camera after introductions. Next, we have Colleen D'Abbene. She is a leader in diagnostics with experience in both biotech and patient care solutions. She is focused on building and launching new and advanced diagnostic solutions that support point-of-care decisions and risk adjudication. Thank you, Colleen, for joining. Next, and folks can get on camera if that works. Next is McCay Barnes. So McCay is a healthcare technology leader who's found joy in seeking ways to innovate in a highly regulated setting like healthcare and all of its challenges. He's led diverse teams of engineers and experts to build products ranging from digital therapeutics all the way through medical device software that serves global patient communities. Thanks, McCay, for joining. And then the last is Colin Gibbons. So Colin is a diagnostics and medtech leader in the cardiovascular space and has some really interesting successes and responsibilities in shaping M&A and BD deals across platform plays in cardiac technology, and now engaging with customers across the North America to pull through those solutions to bedside care. So thank you, Colin, for being here. Okay, so with that, we're going to start on where are we today in digital health regarding biopharma and healthcare. And so, Alex, the first question is for you, which is, in what area do you believe is the most valuable for digital health to start in, mostly from a biopharma paradigm of R&D versus commercial, and why?
Thanks for the question, Ben. And first of all, thanks to Accenture and to Matter for inviting us here to speak today, and for the research that you guys produced. I think it's a really important question about how do we use digital health data and devices better across life sciences and healthcare. I'm a bit biased when it comes to the question of where should we be using digital health data and devices. I spend most of my time today in drug development, as you mentioned, Ben. Historically, though, most of the investment, I believe, I don't know the numbers here, but early it seemed like it was really around the commercial domain, and I think that's because that's where the initial opportunities to make money were for entrepreneurs and startup founders in the beginning. I would take a step back, though, and say today, when we look at the application of digital health devices and data, it really depends from a life sciences sponsor point of view, from a pharma company point of view, which therapeutic area you're in, what that value paradigm is for the company. If you're in an area like cardiovascular disease or diabetes, where we've seen devices and data being used in healthcare treatment historically a lot greater level of comfort within the healthcare treatment paradigm for devices and data, then it's just a lot more natural to add it on. But if you look at a therapeutic area like oncology, in cancer treatment, oncology docs don't go straight to your wearable device or data to get insights from the patient. The first thing they do is look at the patient, talk to the patient. Maybe they're looking at some of their precision medicine data these days, with the importance of biomarkers and mutations in treatment of patients, but they're not necessarily going straight to the digital devices and data. So I think it depends on the therapeutic area, and it also depends on what your definition of digital health really is. If you get really expansive, right, we look at like electronic medical record data. That kind of data is being used for a long time in how we can attract patients to trials and really like understanding where to place trials. So there's many different ways, I think, that in which digital health and data have been used in R&D that maybe were hidden from sight and now coming to the fore and are much more part of the discussion. So I look forward to a lot more utilization of these devices and data in future, and really just a lot more value creation here, Ben.
Yeah, and I'll hop in here. I'm not as biased as Alex. I've worked in both sides, but I would still agree the start in R&D. At least in my experience with software medical device, you're working on something in a clinical trial, and then it's going to get launched commercially in a couple of years. Clinical trials are so rich in data. You have a lot greater control over what data is required, of the patient during that experience. And you can use that data to test hypotheses. It could feed into a model that you want to test out, and that can inform where your commercial product goes. It's really like a lost opportunity if you're starting over at the commercial launch, which is something we faced multiple times, as we launch products. You could have something that's differentiated, that you had some experience out in the wild with a clinical trial that could be the main feature of your commercial launch. So it's really a I would say, somewhat a safer place to start at, and you could do a lot more testing, and it could really feed into that commercial launch to make it differentiated. That sometimes people are missing out of when it's supposed to be a holistic experience from R&D to commercial. It's just sometimes hard to get those teams to play together and to be aligned on that strategy of what does data collection look like.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, McCay. It's making me reflect, Alex, your point. I've recently engaged with a couple clients focused in oncology who, again, were asking, what's the role of digital health in oncology? And from a commercial standpoint, it was difficult to get around. But they're actually taking it earlier into R&D and saying, how can we actually monitor adverse events? And we can think of patient-reported outcomes as an option here, but how can we get closer to the patient to better understand their needs in a clinical trial setting that has the potential to pull through to commercial? So I think there is a bit of a paradigm shift, even in more challenging TAs like oncology. I think it dovetails well, Colleen, for the next question for you, which is, from your experience, what do you think leaders can do to better integrate these digital health strategies into their existing and future healthcare services to enhance patient engagement and ultimately improve health outcomes?
Thank you. So Paula talked about this in some of the research about one of the 5 actions. But in my experience, to really create meaningful solutions, you really need to know your users and care about their lives, right? So observing them within the context of the healthcare challenge, listening to them and engaging them in conversations to learn about how they think, what they really value, understanding their key needs and the challenges they face, and through empathizing, probing, that'll uncover a lot of deep insights about these patients. And those insights will really drive, or rather frame, the problem and drive the right solution. A solution that's going to better engage patients, a solution that patients are going to embrace. And another important aspect here is once you've identified the ideal solution, then it's really important to determine whether it's appropriate to buy, build, or partner to fulfill it, right? And that's not just the development of it, but also the promotion of it or the sales channel of it. It could be one of those 3 or a combination, could be all, right? So those decisions are based on what the market needs, right? What the patients, how the patients are going to engage with you best, but potentially also what might be the market need might be for the partner and other important stakeholders.
I want to tee up a follow-up, and I noticed there was a question in the chat on this. When we talk about digital health and patient data, we tend to focus on patients, but I wanted to open up to the group, thoughts around providers. And I say that because, again, at the Vive Healthcare Conference, there was a whole track on nurses and nurse fatigue, and how can solutions be embedded in workflow to not only help EMR, but help them keep close to the patient, have that empathy and really be at their side, but also give them some scale or some leverage so that they're not burning out. And so I would be interested if there are any thoughts from this team on, the provider lens from adopting new tools and the challenges that persist.
Yeah, Ben, I think that's an interesting question. So I was talking to a medical director for cardiology at a large health system about a month ago on this exact topic. And one of the challenges he's starting to see, especially with AI, with digital health tools, is everybody's coming up with a new algorithm or a new tool to identify a new issue early. I'm identifying AFib 30 days before it happens, a year before it happens. I'm identifying that this patient's going to deteriorate 12 hours before it happens, right? And that's all well and good. You're giving me another alert, and doctors and nurses have alert and alarm fatigue already. When you're identifying those key points in the patient care pathway, you also need to tell me what to do with that data. Don't tell me they're going to have AFib in a year and then not tell me what to do about it, because I don't know how to treat a patient with AFib a year before they have it. And that's really the nut that someone in this space needs to crack, and I haven't seen it yet. That's where you'll really provide valuable information to a caregiver to more effectively treat their patients, reduce sort of this fatigue that we're seeing with nurses in these care settings, and get patients home quicker so they don't have to be in the hospital.
Yeah, and Ben, if I can pile on there a little bit, couldn't agree more, Colin, that clinical utility and the ability to make the data and insights actionable at the point of care are incredibly important, even in R&D when we're doing clinical research, where life sciences companies traditionally control the requirements of the protocol, the requirements of the research that we're doing, the devices and data that we're going to collect. In that, what we're seeing more and more is increased levels of frustration on the part of sites that have to, the clinical research sites that have to grapple with the often, very well intended or always very well intended requirements of the protocol, because the data that needs to be collected needs to be scientifically rigorous. But what it ends up happening is you pile up many different requirements from many different sponsor companies, and now the sites are grappling with tens of devices that are landing in their hands, logons and passwords that they have to manage across many different sponsors. And so there's this increasingly complicated ecosystem of technology and devices that applies both in the commercial domain when we're looking to treat patients that are not necessarily participating in research, but also for those patients that are participating in research and the sites that have to help them through that journey. It's a big problem, and there's companies out there that are looking to solve that right now. AstraZeneca's spinning off Evinova, which I look forward to them simplifying the ecosystem and creating benefits within the clinical workflow for those that are working in research. And I think there's a lot of potential value there that can be created too.
I think that's a great points. It actually dovetails well into the next question. And it's interesting, Colin, when you said that maybe 5-10 years ago, when all of the different at-home genetics testing companies came out, I think 23andMe, et cetera, I had a number of friends who are primary care doctors saying, we don't know what to do with the reports. And, I know that they and a number of other measurement companies had to hire chief medical officers to figure out how to translate that information into something useful. And this was, 10 years ago or more. And now today, with the proliferation of these solutions, it does create kind of this challenge. So I want to take a more view on things. How do we better partner across the healthcare ecosystem? We have the concept that there are many stakeholders. We talk mostly about patients and providers, but pharma, distributors, med tech, and then let's not forget startups that are looking to create solutions along the patient journey. Colin, I like how you mentioned that, very bespoke solutions, right? So I guess the question, and I'll start off with you, Colin, and then maybe go to McCay, is, how do we partner better across the healthcare ecosystem to gather the data, to turn it into actionable insights that's valuable? Like what did some of those partnership models look like?
Great question. And I like how you tie this back to what was going on 10 years ago, because 10 years ago, what was the big trend in healthcare? It was big data, right? Yeah. And what I call it today, I call it big waste of data, because there is no shortage of data at any hospital or health system across the country or payer. They all have plenty of data. They have no clue what to do with any of it. We sell it to them for research, and then they don't know what to do with it. So what do we do with that big waste of data? I'll tie it back to our first question. As a patient, who do I trust to be managing my care? At the end of the day, it's my doctor. That's a unique relationship that we all have in our lives, patient and provider. If I get a mailer from Philips that tells me my hypertension reading at my last appointment and tries to give me a BP cuff, I'm going to go, what the heck is this? How did Philips get this information? But if my provider calls me up and gives me the same information, I'm much more likely to enroll in that hypertension program. So if I am a med tech company trying to launch a remote patient monitoring program, I shouldn't be sending this out as Philips. I should be engaging providers to work with the patient on that specific program. So I wouldn't necessarily say the question is how do different vendors in this space, medtech, pharma, what have you, partner. I would say, how do we all effectively enable the providers to be able to give the best care and patients get the best care?
Yeah, I think Colin, you put it really well there. I think for me, it's you just need to match their expectations of when they expect to receive data, and then expect to do something with it. If they have to, if like a payer has to log into another dashboard that outside of their systems, you have to go through all sorts of IT security requirements. You have to get them to log into a system they're not used to going into, and so it has great data in it, but it doesn't work within their workflow. And so that integration into where they can actually make a decision, those are the solutions that are going to work. They're also the most difficult, right? So that's why we don't have them right now, because integrating into systems is really tough. And then, Colin, you also mentioned establishing trust and communicating value. I think people are a little more sensitive with their medical data than, some other data sources. And so making sure that the people who are in charge of your data are doing what you expect with it and being transparent is so important as well. So just kind of my 2 cents there.
I want to parlay this into, and Colin, I like how the explosion of data, and there's wastelands of data, right? But one thing that I find fascinating, and it's not new, but there's becoming more kind of democracy of patient data. And there's a number of startups now, not well-funded startups, that enable patients to find all of their patient data from every institution they've ever been to, and not only see it and make it readable, but potentially, participate in clinical research or contributed in ways that weren't accessible before. So the next question that kind of dovetails on this, and Alex, I'll start with you, which is around, where have you seen like the greatest changes in our ability to leverage patient data? So maybe from the provider side, but even from the patient side, contribute data that's made you optimistic, or alternatively, where are there still major barriers that we just need to get over? So you could take it the glass half full or half empty, your choice.
Oh, I want to be that glass half full guy, right, Ben? But
Yeah.
I'm gonna take the second part, and then hopefully somebody can pick up from there. I see a fundamental misalignment of incentives for reuse of patient data. And if I look at the domain of data reuse, which I think is a little bit where we're honing in on here, if I as a patient cannot participate in the value creation of from the reuse of my data, then I have no reason to donate those data to any kind of reuse. And yet we know that there are companies, there are whole industries that have grown, have flourished with the reuse of patient data from hospitals, from a number of different sources. And there's business models, there's money to be made out there, right? And yet the patients whose data comprise those data sets are, as far as I can tell, largely not participating in the economic value that's created there. So that's the main reason why I'm a little bit pessimistic about our ability, let's say, to reach the full potential value, until there's an economic model and more of an alignment of incentives between the patient, the provider, the resellers of the data, and the consumers of patient data. I don't think we're going to reach the full potential. But your survey showed that patients are willing to share that data, right, today, and are not even aware where it may be being reused. So I think that's what, if I can leave it on an optimistic note, the willingness is there. There's just not the economic incentives and model to really help us to capitalize on this through the economy.
And part of the research that I found compelling is the simple statement of being asked to share the data. Now, obviously, that comes with how will it be used and what are the incentives at play. I think that those matter. Alex, what I find interesting about your statement is that anecdotally, what I felt is different or special is in rare disease and ultra-orphan disease, that you find patient populations and caregiver communities that are intimately connected with researchers, clinicians, the full cycle of new product development, and their willingness to participate. And in some projects I've been on, hour-long interviews sharing their journey and the challenge statements. It's amazing to see. And the question I ask myself is what's, obviously there's small community, they know each other, but how do you scale some of that special sauce to these other areas where it's harder to find patients and incentivize them to contribute in the way that you see in rare disease? So that's, I don't know, a tee up. I don't know if Colleen, you would want to add to that, coming from a bit of the rare disease space, or if anyone else wants to add, and kind of how we overcome some of these patient data sharing barriers.
Well, I think that it's something definitely to be explored, because it's certainly been our experience to have these patients, these rare disease patients, engage really robustly. So for other conditions, I certainly think there's opportunity there to leverage that model.
The next question that I had, and Colin, I'd start with you, is, and you started to allude to this, which is around, we know patients are using devices and digital tools everywhere. I love how, in cardiac care, there's remote patient monitoring has been, again, a thing for so many years, and how you can, identify, build more algorithms to identify patients. So I'm really interested in your perspective on this. But there's this proliferation of devices and digital tools. What do you think is most important to get it right from a consumer-facing perspective on these solutions to drive adoption? Again, focus more on the patients and really convey the value to them in using some of these either algorithms or next generation devices.
The most important thing is going to be usability. So you can have a 30-day mobile cardiac telemetry study where a patient gets a little patch when they leave the hospital, and they have to put that patch on their chest and wear it for 30 days. That's the duration of the study. That's the duration of the CPT codes that you can bill. The adhesive needs to be replaced several times. So every 5 days, you need to take the adhesive off, clean yourself, put a new one on. Guess the average length of time for each of those studies is not 30 days, it's 5. And it's because nobody wants to take that patch off and keep putting it back on. So if you don't have something that's usable, it's going to be completely useless. There was a lot of innovation in the Holter space for cardiac care over the last 2 decades or so, to go from Holters with leads on your chest to just a single patch with 3 ECG leads embedded within that, or 5. So that gives you a much easier device to use, especially for pediatric care patients who are going to yank all those leads off whenever they have a chance, and actually get patients to do that study for a longer period of time. So I would definitely highlight usability to make sure that the innovations we make are actually helpful and used.
Yep, and to add on to that, not only just does it work, but it needs to fit into my life, right? Because we hear patients all the time that their disease doesn't define them. They're a person with, X disease. So they're expecting all these devices to work as well as their AirPods do. So that's the environment that you work in, is like medical doesn't get a break because we're in the healthcare space. Your app or your device is compared to the things that are used every day. So if they don't work the same, then I view it as a bad product, just like I would view it as any other product. I may use it once. If it doesn't work the first time, then I'm sorry. It's like that's how consumers work, and physicians as well, right? If something's not working, they have very limited time. They're not giving you a second chance. So that first impression is so important when it comes to devices. And then just to add on, or go ahead, Colin, you have a comment?
Oh, I was just going to give a great example of something that you mentioned. I had someone come to me a few years ago with a maternal pregnancy device to wear on your belly to help monitor the infant inside of you. And it had the best algorithms, best thing ever when I saw it on paper, right? They brought it in, the device was square. So you have a square device on a round belly. And I thought, okay, this doesn't make any sense. Clearly, no one thought this through effectively.
I'm interested, McCay, going back to your point. It triggered. There's a device called a Whoop that's just a wristband, and it monitors biometrics. And one of their claims is just they're building dashboards and useful insights, and you don't have to do anything. It's kind of invisible, right? And it's going in the face of more intelligent smartwatches like an Apple Watch or Fitbit, et cetera. And so the question I have for you, or anyone can take this, because it was, I think Colin may have mentioned this, is around alerts and alert fatigue. And we have the struggle on, especially as we're looking with patients and adherence and compliance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is around nudging. And, where do devices, provide help in nudging versus, you take it off because it was the third alert too many. So interested as a product designer, how you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, for the products I worked on, it had to fit into what were our patients, our end users doing. Like if we found that they were using Apple Watches or they were using more Google devices, we had to integrate into the areas that they're going to be. Unless your product is so amazing that it's worth wearing it as a one-off. Like people just aren't going to make the effort on a large scale to start to use your specific item. So I think for us, we always try to figure out where do we fit in on the customer journey or the patient journey, and how do we better integrate there rather than making something standalone. Because at the places I worked at, there's plenty of startups who could build a better tool, build a better thing than we could, but could they integrate as well into that journey? No. And so that's where we had better success.
I think we're in this interesting phase right now. And if I take a step back as a student of innovation adoption and the way that new products get into the market, right, and new ecosystems build up, I still think, I'd be interested to hear where others are at. I still think in terms of digital health innovation dispersion, we're still in the middle of this. And there's a lot of consolidation, I guess, to come, and a lot of integration potential before we really see the linkages between solutions that patients are using, the medical advice that your healthcare provider can give you, the ability to reuse the data, the ability to use it in research, all the things we're talking about today, for those things to link up and actually have a really smooth experience for patients in the ecosystem and for us to grab the value from it. I don't think we're more than halfway through kind of the changes that we're going to see here. So I'm definitely an optimist, but I think there's a lot of those dynamics at play as we consider why aren't we getting the full value.
I'm gonna take us to the next question on value on that note, Alex. And actually, if you want to take a stab at it first, then I'd be interested in the group's thinking here. Sure. When we say the word value, value can mean many things. But in the past, many companies have struggled with defining value with standalone digital health solutions. We've seen many get well funded and not find product market fit or a reimbursement strategy that made it sustainable. So the question I have for the group is, how should we think about value with digital health, and how can it be leveraged to enhance, patient health and decision making?
I'm going to give a simple answer and then let others weigh in. Does it improve patient outcomes, however we measure that? Because if there's a way for us to measure an improvement in patient outcomes that's being delivered, there should be a way for us to capture the financial value and increase the ability to bring those solutions that are beneficial to patients.
I'll add in there. I agree with you, Alex. If the product is valuable and it can not only add value to a patient and the health outcome, but it could also add value to differentiate an existing product, to enhance that product and reach that patient faster. So not necessarily keep it standalone.
Yeah, we also need to think about the folks who are trying to capture that value. What are their capabilities to do it? So I'll give you a great example. There have been so many well-funded startups in the remote patient monitoring space, everything from diabetes to weight management to hypertension, and very few of them are actually successful. A big reason is, okay, I'm going to go to a hospital and tell them, you have these CPT codes that you can bill. They've been out for 10 years. You need to remotely monitor these patients outside the hospital. Hospitals are not equipped to have nurses sitting in a bunker down the street from the main hospital, calling patients on the phone, getting to make sure they do their 16 BGM readings per month. That's not what hospitals do. So sure, there's a lot of value there. You can bill that code $50 a month times in perpetuity, but I don't have the capabilities to do that. So the way we'll be successful is finding the folks who have the capabilities to call on those patients and remotely manage them. That's where we're missing that value capture, is the wrong people have the incentives to capture that value.
If I channel that energy, Colin, that there will be opportunity for startups, especially in remote care, pilots potentially in certain regions, to kind of prove out some of those use cases and figure out, how to reach ultra hard to reach patient populations, et cetera. That becomes more compelling to, fold into broader healthcare services as a potential.
That's right. And if you think about who's ultimately incentivized to keep a patient out of the hospital, it's a payer, not a hospital. Hospitals make money because people come in the hospital. Payers make money because you're healthy, you stay out of the hospital, and I bill you your premium once a month, right? So how can payers be helped to use to keep that patient out of the hospital? And like we mentioned earlier in the panel discussion, activate the primary care provider to keep that patient out of the hospital, to give them the education to use that blood glucose meter 16 times a month like they're supposed to, rather than once a month, and then they end up coming in for a diabetic emergency or congestive heart failure. Make sure you get on the scale a couple times a day so you don't end up in the emergency department.
That's exactly right. It's actually, that was regional payers and employers were the target audience for a lot of the startups at Vive last week for that exact reason, to prove out very specific use cases. So the last question I had, and then I'm going to turn it to the Q&A. Last question I had, which I'll to anyone who wants to take this, is around Gen AI and just, the consummate interests in most large companies that I know of are setting up, generative AI centers of excellence and looking at use cases. And one of them, has to be getting closer to the patient and understanding the different data sources and whether it's supporting R&D initiatives or, better patient monitoring in a commercial setting. I guess the question I'd ask this group is, where are you in terms of Gen AI, in terms of making sense of this data and turning this into actionable insights? I don't know if there's a baseball analogy of what inning we're in, but you can kind of use your own analogy of where you think we are. But anyone who want to take that from their own experience or perspective?
Yeah, I can start. For me, I feel like we're in the third inning. Maybe. We're just in the beginning stages where it's maybe dropped off a bit of the hype that it can do everything, as people are starting to dive in and understand, is there really a use case here? There's two things that I think people are having trouble with, is getting the data sets in order. You have this data wasteland, as Colin mentioned, but if you want a model, you need to organize that data. And those are usually very expensive data engineers or data scientists to do some of that work initially. Because you could have the best model, but if your data set is poor, your model is not going to really spit anything out that's useful. And then the next part of it is, you have this great model set up. Well, what's the value that you're delivering with this model? It's some black box no one understands. They can't trust the output. Like, I see that all the time, where this is the next best action kind of model. Well, like, I don't understand it. It maybe doesn't vibe with my experience. Like, you can't communicate that value. The person who's supposed to pick up the action and do something with it, it's not doing anything with it. So there's kind of establishing your data set, making sure that you have clear value communication for the parties that need to use it, and then availability of those parties to do something with it. So we're getting there slowly, but I think people are still trying to figure out, like, what can I actually do with this, and how can I deliver value on top of just showing you some more data?
I'll take the next one. I've seen a differential diagnosis app, and physicians are using it currently. but I could see like another use case, right, as that matures, where it might be open, you could open that up for patients, right? And, bring down, the level of the return to, a simpler response, answer for patients to understand, but help patients, be advocates for their own health, to help them navigate the healthcare system, understand what type of specialists to see, what might be the more common differential or, diagnosis versus rare, those types of things. So I'm optimistic.
I see, I don't know, I don't want to be the outlier here. But I do see a bit more slowness in Gen AI adoption in the kinds of settings we've been talking about. I've seen a lot of adoption kind of on internal processes where training data sets are cleaner. Digital health data is dirty and diverse, and there's a lot of it. There's tons of it, but I'm just yeah, I think that there's definitely a number of use cases out there that offer value, but just from my personal perspective within drug development, a large life sciences company, there's a lot of risk to setting Gen AI tools loose on patients and other external stakeholders to provide recommendations or other insights. And I think life sciences especially is going to be a bit more conservative about adoption of those types of things than other players in the industry will be. But we're definitely using it for internal processes and seeing a lot of investment. And I'm feeling regret about not buying NVIDIA stock a long time ago.
Yeah, right. Infrastructure players. I'm going to put you, Alex, at the first inning, at the beginning, not in the warm up, but first inning. But I think that those are some good hurdles that you've mentioned. I'm going to go in the last 6-7 minutes. I want to go to some questions that we've received. Thank you, everyone online for submitting questions. So people have been posting, but I appreciate both the professional questions and also questions from the patient perspective. So we'll start with the first one, which again, open to the panel. How are we ensuring that socioeconomic and/or cultural ethnic research is being utilized in making clinical recommendations? So that's a kind of a heavier topic of, how are we making sure that that's being included in digital health and patient data playing a role in solving that challenge? Anyone want to tackle that from the diagnostics perspective or med tech? Or go ahead, McCay.
Yeah, I can answer that. So I've been working a lot lately with claims data. And, there's new data sets that look at, SDOH that we're looking to join in with our current data sets to make sure that we're able to have a purview about, like, what do things look like, what are the characteristics of patients. So I think a lot of what I've seen is just including it in your data set is step one that we haven't really done, and figuring out where that data is. Because we know there are differences, but still trying to really figure it out. And that first step is actually addressing that there is a difference and figuring out how to incorporate it into your decision-making, into your data set.
It's also important to make sure that the populations that you want to serve, the decision makers for that population look like the population you want to serve. So if you're a community health center in an underserved area, make sure your board of directors and your C-suite looks like the patients that you're trying to serve. I still think we have a lot of work to do in that area, but the more we talk about that and the more we give the right people those opportunities to help make those decisions, the more effectively we'll be able to meet some of those underserved populations.
Actually, there's a follow-up. It's a separate question, and I'm going to come back to you, Colin, but interested in the rest of the group's opinion on this as well. You mentioned before, Colin, about sharing data with your provider, your HCP, right? And that's your your circle of trust, and that if a large multinational company reached out, you'd feel kind of potentially invasion of trust. I guess there's a number of questions that are around, I want to share data. What can I do to increase trust and transparency? So that's kind of a patient fear or consideration. And then the question that I have, which I think was mentioned here, is there a role for large provider systems to play in building that trust? Johns Hopkins, UPenn, some of the larger academic medical centers as a conduit, or is your tilt, it needs to be at that patient to provider level? Or could it be so it's a two-part question. Kind of how do we address trust and transparency? And the second is provider versus institution.
Yeah, I'll answer the two-part question with one answer. I personally don't think I'm ever going to trust Philips or Bristol Myers Squibb or Optum or AstraZeneca the same way I trust my provider. I think the only way we can work effectively together is for those companies to be enablers of the provider, to give them the information that they need to most effectively treat their patient.
Any other examples from the group of where you've seen trust, maybe even an R&D setting, of where that's it's again at the provider level, or examples of where that might be, what might help engender trust?
Okay, or Colleen, you had something to go, or?
I was just going to say, I'm going to really wholeheartedly agree with Colin, right? And, just considering what the partnership, like a partnership strategy or a channel strategy, right? To help ensure that the solution is integrated into a trusted party, that trusted party believes in it and adopts it, and it reaches the patient through a trusted party.
Got it. Okay. We're right about at time, so I wanted to just take a minute and thank the panel for all of your thoughts and kind of wading through this area. There's clearly a lot of value to be taken here, and even though we may live in a data wasteland, we are all striving to improve patient outcomes, from developing new products, integrating into healthcare workflow and systems more effectively, diagnosing patients earlier to prevent poor outcomes. So it's exciting to see everyone here. While I've spent most of my time in biopharma, I really enjoy engaging with such a diverse group. So I really appreciate all of your thoughts and provokes and challenge statements, leaving here more optimistic about the space and the potential. So thank you, everyone, for your time. And thanks, everyone online, for joining and for the questions. This will be recorded, so if you want to dial back in and check it out, please do. Appreciate everyone for making the time to join today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ben.